to Volya Radio. Slava Ukraini!
Hey, Robin, I think you
Terrific.
did it.
Oh, I did.
Congratulations.
No, I didn't do it. That's the person who's doing the host phone business did it. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's this. What can I say? Anyway, welcome to Ukraine today with your co-hosts Alan and Robin. I'm going to do a quick timestamp, and then we've got a bunch of stuff to talk about today. Today is the 28th of July. It is 4:01 in Los Angeles, 5:01 in Edmonton, which remains in the free and independent country of Canada, in Alberta. In New York, where I'm at 7:01. London, it is 1 minute after midnight that will make it on the 29th. In Warsaw, 1:01 a.m. In Kyiv, 2:01, and in the Workers' Paradise of Perth, Australia, 7:01, and in Tokyo, 8:01. Japan has had a rather significant earthquake, and I know there've been some people really badly impacted by it. So we can hope that is being dealt with. Anyway, so here we are. Welcome, Alan.
Thanks, Robin. It's great to be back on Volya Radio with you regularly. I think we can dependably say every Tuesday night here, Eastern Time, you'll find Volya Radio with Robin and Alan. But I don't think many Tuesdays will be as significant and interesting as today's Tuesday has been, Robin, with President Zelenskyy in Washington. Um, I'm looking for some news right now, but to the best of my information, Zelenskyy is meeting with all 100 United States senators somewhere in the U.S. Capitol right now. My guess is probably in the old U.S. Senate chamber, but somewhere in the Capitol. And this is because the U.S. Senate will be voting tonight. These are only procedural votes, but will be voting tonight on sanctions legislation that will give Trump the opportunity and the power to impose pretty deep, broad, devastating sanctions and tariffs on Russia. Now, it so happens that some brilliant aide in the Senate has added Iran to this legislation. There are also other bills coming up in the Senate and in Congress to enable Trump, if he so chooses, to sanction Russia pretty harshly.
Yes, and that all has to do with willingness at this point. It will pass. I think it will pass Congress, thank God. Um, but I must say, one thing that I've gotten out of today is we've seen pictures of Zelensky and Trump with a smile on his face. He's usually doing that nasty grumpy look. Actually smiling, and I must say I don't trust him as far as I can throw him. But I think that the Ukrainians, long suffering and their self control and not giving it back to him. The kind of nasty stuff that Trump and the people around him have said about Ukraine. Ukraine has resolutely remained diplomatic and polite and all those things we wish our representatives were. And I think we're really seeing it pay off now. I think many of us, we're dreaming of seeing Zelensky tell Trump where to go. I mean, I think everyone is so frustrated by it. He never did, and I think at this point, he is going to get whatever can be gotten out of Trump. I don't know how much it's going to be. I hope to God he got something. He did something. He's getting something with more patriots. But the fact that J.D. Vance was not in attendance. which was a very good thing. And the fact that that they had a meeting without press, and on both sides are reporting that they felt it was productive. As I said, we'll talk is cheap. We'll see what comes out of it. But I really think the Ukrainians have given us a master class in diplomacy in the last few years.
I would agree with that. And it's not just Zelensky who has conducted this master class, but a number of Ukrainian foreign ministers, Kuleba, and currently Sabiha, who was reappointed foreign minister after the latest dissolution of the Ukrainian government. And this is true, Robin, that Zelensky uh, has become a kind of master diplomat. But I will also say that all of the news coming out of Washington today uh, is is confusing and it's chaotic, and this is regardless of uh, those individual meetings at Lindsey Graham's funeral and in the National Cathedral. We saw Zelensky and Netanyahu speaking there. Uh, Zelensky was quite near the front. I didn't watch the funeral because I could not bear listening to Donald Trump deliver a eulogy, but I did want to see him asleep in the pews of the National Cathedral, and that, of course, was a given that would happen. But the reason I say that news coming out of Washington today is chaotic and confusing. We've seen reports that the Trump administration is continuing to refuse to give Ukraine $400 million that was approved more than a year ago. Now we see the Trump administration saying it will be delayed until 2029. And this, to me, at the very moment when Ukraine needs the help of the United States, it is criminal negligence, Robin.
Yeah, of course, I absolutely agree with you. I honestly, though, I am more concerned at this point with money that Ukraine has that they could be using to buy Patriots, for example, that they can't do that unless some stocks are freed up for them to access. So I think those are two different issues. The fact that money is not already in Ukraine is an absolute outrage. It goes against the will of the American people, which this guy is supposed to represent. Of course, we know he doesn't. But we also, independent of that, even if he continues with this intransigence, if they can get him to loosen up on some patriots so that Ukraine can get something to protect themselves, especially as the winter gets closer, that will at least be a win.
Well, there are simply no Patriot interceptor missiles to be found, apparently, anywhere in the world. This is partly because of of how wasteful the United States has been using Patriot air defense in the Middle East. I mean, I'll tell you one thing. Ukrainians do not use Patriot missiles to shoot down Shahed drones or Garin drones, the Russian model of the Iranian drone. That, of course, would be stupid, but that is exactly what the Americans have done in the Middle East in this current war with Iran. uh, uh, Patriot systems deployed in the Persian Gulf and the Middle East are being used to shoot down drones, Robin. And this is
Yeah,
utterly ridiculous.
of course, agreed. But still, it's not only the United States that holds patriots. Britain has some. I think the United States has some lying around anyway. But there are other countries. We're not talking about the 800 patriots that the United States squandered in this ridiculous war, and with attacks on Iran. But there are, Ukraine, as you said, Ukraine uses these very judiciously. So even a small number would make a big difference. I know there was a discussion, I don't know if it's happened yet. There was a discussion at one point that Poland was supposed to be given a guarantee by the United States that if they freed up more of their patriots to go to Ukraine, that the United States would guarantee that patriots from the United States would get to Poland very quickly if they had a need for them sometime in the future. I don't know if I don't know what's happened with that. I don't know if the Poles really ought to trust this president administration anyway. But the fact is that there are, if every place that holds patriots could free up just a few, that would make a massive difference. And I agree with you. There aren't as many as need to be, and this this is why other things are being worked on. This European anti-ballistic system has a lot of it has a lot of positive aspects, and I think it's going to get ramped up a lot faster than we expect. But there still is this gap between when other alternatives are available and now, and there's a disastrous winter looming if we can't get some kind of defense into Ukraine before the winter hits.
Completely right, Robin. I mean, we're in the middle of this summer, but winter is on everyone's mind. And talking about gaps, mind the gap is probably going to be the byword of this summer season in Ukraine. Robin, I noticed we have it's Heimar's time with us, and I saw his hand up and then go down. But Heimars, please join in the conversation. Heimars, if
Or
you
yeah, he may have stepped away. Yeah, yes, as everyone knows here, if you come up to speaker, you get called on. But I must say, I would ask other people. I see a bunch of other people down in listeners. We would love to have you come up and talk to us. Alan and I, we talk to each other all the time, but getting some more perspectives from some of our listeners is also good. We like listening to you. I think people come because they seem to like listening to us, Alan. Either that or they're masochists. I don't think so though. But we'd love to have more people up. I just I wanted to mention there was a long post on Twitter today about this Freya European anti-ballistic prototype, which Ukraine is projecting to have ready in the first half of 2026. I mean, this is the Ukrainian development arc, as opposed to what happens in the Pentagon, where in the middle of 2020, in the middle of 2026, we're in 2026. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, first half of next year. So we're talking about 2027. But anyway, I mean, when you think about the arc in the United States, it would take that long to get somebody to write a bill to allocate some money that'll go to the Pentagon, where they're going to start trying to figure out and try to put together research groups and whatever, and projecting in 25 years they might have something. So thank God for Ukrainians development, and I think Europe at this point should be very, very grateful that they've got Ukraine on their side, because this they are seeing in Ukraine what kind of damage the Russians could do to the rest of Europe, because all of Europe is pretty much is within striking distance of Russian ballistics. Hopefully, Ukraine will be continue to take care of the Archer and destroy more factories that are producing these things. But the only way Europe stays safe is in having a ballistic missile shield, which the Ukrainians are in large part working on providing for them. One of the fascinating things about Alan, and I'm going to turn this back to you, is I read that and now my screen just died. Okay, that this is all going to be it's not going to be like a single vendor kind of thing where you have to they're it's going to be very interchangeable, modular. Like there's a saying, maybe Sweden wants to use Saab gear, so they put it in. Denmark has a radar that they prefer; they could use it there. So all of this is going to be, like object-oriented programming is going to be modules that can be put together differently depending on the needs of each country. So I think this is just typical Ukrainian thinking out of the box engineering, and I think it's going to really make a difference. Back to you, Alan.
It is uh, it, absolutely the epitome of how Ukrainians think. The whole modular design of what I'm sure will be an effective ballistic missile defense system, effective and less expensive than the Patriot system. But this is why I say mind the gap. 2027 is tomorrow, and it's a long ways away. And when you say in the first half of 2027, this means sometime between January and July 2027. And here we are at the end of July 2026. Ukraine, especially Kyiv, which has lately been targeted by Russian ballistic missiles, is utterly defenseless, frankly. I mean, they just don't have the air defense systems to take down Russian ballistic missiles, and they are primarily being aimed at Kyiv. And it's a week ago, but 50 ballistic missiles in less than an hour's time launched against Kyiv. Now it used to be roughly every 10 days, 12 days that Russia was able to unleash this kind of attack on Kyiv. Now it's less than 10 days. And so you might actually see Russia launching this kind of massive ballistic missile attack on Kyiv 2 times in the space of a week. And this will be a terrible thing to see. Robin, let's go to Anka, and let's keep all of our Volya Radio listeners tuned in tonight. There's a lot more news coming your way. Anka, welcome.
Hey, yeah. So I was wondering, I know we've been the going back to the sanctions package that Lindsey Graham had been working on for a long time. I thought at some point somebody had said something about it having been, oh, I don't know, watered down or something like that. Do we know what's in this sanctions package? I haven't heard details of it. I was wondering if you guys knew.
It's a good question. I know a little bit about what is in the sanctions package. It's been enlarged, so it's not only about Russia; it's also about Iran, which strikes me as a huge problem. I don't know if it makes it more likely to be passed in both the Senate and the House, or more likely to be debated and amended. And what I will have to do is take a look, and I will try to do that so I can be specific about what is in the bill. It's being voted on tonight in the Senate, but these are only procedural votes. It probably will not come up for final passage until tomorrow or Thursday or something like that, and then it's not going to pass out of Congress uh, this summer because the Senate and the House is already adjourned for its summer vacation. The Senate is going to adjourn in less than a week, so this bill will just be hanging there for weeks until Congress returns in September, and then we'll see the real action on this bill. But Anka, it's such a good question. I will try to get my ducks in a row about what is in this legislation before we sign off on Volya Radio tonight. Unless, Robin, you have read the bill.
I should have. Really, there's no excuse, but no, I have not. And partly for me, I think a lot of us probably are suffering from this fatigue anyway. Is that you read the whole damn thing, and you know that it all depends on whether Trump decides to actually use the money once the damn thing is passed. I think we should know what's in it. I absolutely agree, Anka, and I should have looked into it a little bit more. But I sort of, after a while, sort of, I'm getting very cynical about the whole thing. Hopefully, Zelensky has worked his magic. He's worked his magic on other people, but we shall see.
No worries. I was just thinking, if you happen to know, that would be something that'd be very handy. But if you happen to find out at some point, or if you can point, if I should even go looking for it, I mean, I could try to do that.
Well, Anka, I can actually send you a link to the bill as it is currently under debate on the floor of the Senate, if that will be helpful, and I will do that.
Alan, if you
Uh,
could put it in the back channel, I'd like to take a look at this too when you get a chance.
Absolutely, I can send the bill to anyone who wants to read it. Uh, you know,
Well, I
it's
wants to maybe overstating it, but yeah.
I love reading legislation. The only better thing about reading legislation is reading the congressional record, which is a record of statements made on the floors of the Senate and the House. The interesting thing about the congressional record is that there is what I will call an accurate and live congressional record that is distributed every single morning after a congressional session. So after the Senate's been in session or after the House has been in session, and these are hundreds of copies of congressional records distributed, but usually by 7 a.m. Okay, so you get to your desk between 7 and 8. You get to read the record, and you specifically read what your member said on the floor in order to correct it. And those corrections have to be submitted, uh, that day, and then the next day, the so-called congressional record, the official record, is published. But all kinds of insults uh, and also swears and profanity and just non-facts and ridiculous statements have been crossed out and corrected and changed into something brilliant, usually by
Exactly.
a, by a press secretary or a staff member. And you read through this congressional record, and you do think to yourself, "Oh my God, I can't believe he said that."
No, I remember when I was in law school, that's one of the things they had us do in the first semester, so which is trace legislation right through from the beginning. Yeah, it gets wild there. The only thing that's more fun than that is reading the Federal Register, which is a compendium of all the regulations that have been passed. That I highly recommend for people who have insomnia.
But so that's a little insight into democracy in the United States. No one really wants to look into its innards. But this is, I think, another topic that we should really take on tonight, Robin, and that is how Ukraine is showing the world that democracy works, and also showing how it works. So there have been demonstrations on the streets, not only of Kyiv, but of just about every major city in Ukraine. So Kyiv, Kharkiv, which has been under threat of Russian bombardment every day, Odessa, Lviv, Chernihiv, Dnipro, even Mykolaiv. Uh, Protests, Ukrainians on the street declaring their unhappiness with the dismissal of Mikhailo Fedorov, and it continues.
Yeah, that's right, and it has not it has not seemed to have died down very much. The thing to see though, and I've said this when reading about the revolution of dignity. Even if you're going to have a revolution, do it like the Ukrainians do, because they're out there singing old Ukrainian folk songs and popular songs from the '60s and '70s, and there's no looting going on. There's you don't hear anger. You hear just quiet determination that the government is going to listen to the people and do what the people want. And this, as many people have pointed out, the Ukraine can't have elections now because under martial law, elections can't be held. And logically, you can see why not. 20% of the country is under occupation by an outside aggressor. Many people have been displaced. Many people are on the front line. It'd be hard for them to vote. And you know damn well if they open polling stations that the Russians would target them immediately. So there can't be elections, but that doesn't mean that democracy is not alive and well in Ukraine. Democracy now is taking the form of really, it's like a direct plebiscite. People are going out in the street and saying they can't vote for it right now, but they can go out and make their voices heard. And I don't know what's going to come out at the end of all this, but I suspect it's going to be good because, the people in the positions to make these changes are hearing. Zelensky has really he's not Yanukovych. You don't see them calling out people to quiet down the demonstration or everything or anything. He doesn't seem to have a massive ego problem with this. Not to say the man doesn't have an ego, obviously he does, but I find it extremely powerful example of real direct democracy in action. And I have a lot of hope that, as I said, we're going to come out of this with a great team in place, the team that's going to finish the war.
It may well be the team that will finish the war, but Robin, I kind of doubt that because I think the war is going to continue for years. I think the war is going to continue for at least 2 years or more, and so it's likely that there will be new governments. But what is really interesting to me as I watch these protests unfold and as I watch Zelensky assemble a new government after dismissing the government that served Ukraine for roughly 6 months. Um, some of the ministers have been reappointed, and some of the ministers have not been reappointed. But what the protests are about, in part, right now, is asking the Rada to come back into session. The Rada uh, adjourned after, or slightly, or maybe, but whether it was before or after the prime minister resigned, I don't know. But the important fact is the Rada adjourned. They're not coming back into session until the middle of August 18 or 19 or something like that. And so it means that what Ukraine has is an acting government. All of the ministers of the various governmental departments, including defense, including the foreign ministry, the interior ministry, you name it, these are all acting ministers appointed by Zelensky, but not yet confirmed by the Rada. And I think this is significant because it's an unusual moment for Ukraine to be in.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I'm not sure. I have not actually seen that has been a major thing that the demonstrators have talked about. I think more of it has to do with making sure that the direction Fedorov was heading in is not diverted. Yeah, it would be it the RADA coming back into session and confirming these appointments would be a good thing. I agree. They are, though the government is still functioning. And if the people are in place, even if they're temporary appointments, they're still able to function. So it would be better to have everything nailed down, but I don't think it's critical at this point.
Yeah, I'm not saying that the government isn't functioning. It continues to function. In terms of Mikhail Fedorov and his future, Zelensky seems to have determined that quite decisively today, saying that Fedorov will not be invited back into his government, will not be reappointed as defense minister, and Fedorov has already turned down other positions offered to him. And I do think this is a loss to Zelensky and the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian government. And at the same time, I'll say, to all appearances, the new Minister of Defense, it is quite capable and forward looking.
Yeah, I think he is, and Drupadi is an absolute rock star. The thing with Fedorov, the problem is, of course, we're viewing this from thousands of miles away. We're viewing this mostly through, uh, uh, not the language that any of this is happening. We're getting, second, third hand reports. And I wonder, and I haven't read this, but I wonder that whether there was a personality issues between Fedorov and Sersky, and I'm just wondering whether part of this, whether Fedorov in his push to get things done, and God bless him, I think he digital transformation was what he continued to try to do as Minister of Defense. He may not have the political chops that needs to be in that position completely. And one of the things that he did not do well, and the previous prime minister, Sviridenko, did not do well either, was to get the Rada on board, to get things actually passed. The political chops you need to get those kind of things done, to get the Rada to pass bills that need to be passed, to get appointments okay. So we don't know what else went on behind the scenes, but there may be a feeling that someone with a little bit more of an ability to continue what Fedorov's been doing, but also be able to get some more buy-in from members of the Verada who they need in order to advance. This may have been part of it. I don't know. This is just theorizing.
Well, we'll keep talking about that because it really is a key topic to continue discussing. But I see Heimar's time is back with his hand up. Heimar's, welcome, and please go ahead.
Thanks. Sorry, I had my hand up, but I had to put it down because I had to take a medical call for 20 minutes. So, but I did want to answer a question. I don't know if you guys have talked more about the Patriots in Ukraine after I left. So it turns out the Greeks actually did or are shipping 200 Patriots to Ukraine as of July 7th. How long they will take to get there, who knows? But so,
Well, could I ask Hymas, where did you see this? I'd love to follow this up.
well, let me give you a little background. Uh, by the way, it's in Grok, it's in Chat GPT, and everywhere else. So a little background on Greece. They were one of the original countries to get the Patriot system. They have 36 launchers, 320 PAC-2s currently right now, 6 batteries. They have been buying like crazy since the late 1990s, right? And they have an agreement with Saudi Arabia on the side. It's a bilateral agreement just between those two countries, has nothing to do with NATO, where Greece will supply Patriots batteries, 2 batteries to Saudi Arabia anytime they ask for it, like to fight off the Houthis. So there's 1 battery there right now you guys may have read about in the last week that is fighting off the Houthis, this Greek Patriot battery. But anyway, they recently acquired some more PAC-3s. So it used to be said that when Greece wanted to trade something or give something away, they demanded one for one. Well, with all the NATO and EU pressure on them to free up some of their PAC-2s, they just said, fuck it, well, we're going to do it. So they sent 200 of the 320 that they have in stock. And I think the date was around July 7th. This is that most people don't know this. But let's see if how long it takes to get them there, right? Who knows what condition they're in and whatever. So
Yeah, I'm just doing a little bit of checking back here. I'm not finding any. Well, we'll see. I'm gonna give this a minute to run. Um, we unfortunately there's the fog of war that is involved in a lot of this stuff. I hope this does happen. I hope that this is not just under discussion, but it's actually happening. But we're going to have to.
Zelensky actually mentioned it, I think, on the 14th.
Actually, here I see it's reporting is about a request of negotiation, not a confirmed shipment at this point. So
right,
yeah,
nobody's
and
ever
Athens
agreed.
has given no indication that it's agreed so far. So this is something. This is Ukraine is seeking Patriot missiles from Greece, but it's not, unfortunately, not a done deal yet. But we can hope.
Well, from what I understand, he all signed and sealed. But here's the thing: as Zelensky mentioned on the 14th, I think it was, he's got a lot of signed, done deals that never arrive, right? So, and that not just from Greece, but everywhere, right? Even Pearl. So, we have to take it for what it is. But Greece's foreign minister said, "Yep, go ahead, take them." So, and that was the guy that was really pushing hard to make sure that they only got the traditional one for one. So, anyway, let's see what happens.
Well, it's absolutely needed in Ukraine, in Kyiv. There's no question about that. Let's keep this discussion going with just American. Welcome and go ahead, please.
Hi. So I'm very interested in hearing more about this. I know nothing about military and anything like that. My bloodline is more of very strong faith, in which is what kind of. I just had a question because my history I've had to find out a lot only in after my grandfather died in 2019 when I went from looking at him like this guy is so awesome. He's tiny, but he has like balls of steel to me because he was the only adult who stood up for me. But regardless, he was Catholic, just like my mother was Catholic, but Roman Catholic. And I was wondering if there's like a tie or somehow because I know he was originally Ukrainian Greek Catholic. Um, I don't. I have been digging through history and learning so much about because my grandmother's German, and it's a lot. And so I get confused. And I was just wondering, is there any kind of like fondness or history, like with Greece that might kind of make sense? I just don't know enough. I only know about the schism with the churches here in America that were started with Orthodox and now Ukrainian Catholic, which was originally Ukrainian Greek Catholic. So I just was wondering about that if anybody knew, because
Yeah,
my brain feels like it's going to explode trying to understand it all, and I'd rather just ask somebody who knows better.
yeah, it is. It is confusing. The in Western Ukraine, since about I guess it's the late 17th century, there has been something called the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. Greek does not mean there's any connection with Greece, but it means that they use the Byzantine Rite. The same that if you go into a Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, you go into an Orthodox church, the liturgy is very similar, but it's the Greek is because of that similarity in liturgy, not because there's a particularly connection between Ukraine and Greece. Um, so yeah, I guess that was does that I'm not sure what else you were asking about that, but I think that's that's the Greek. In fact, I was told in Ukraine they still routinely call it Ukrainian Greek Catholic. In the United States, I know some churches are calling themselves Ukrainian Catholic, leaving the Greek out because of this very confusion that it makes it sound as though they've got some particular connection to Greece, which they don't. As I said, it's solely because although the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church is part of the Universal Catholic Church in communion with Rome. There are like 25 different churches that belong to Malachites and a whole bunch of them, Copts. And one of the largest non-Roman Catholic church is the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. But they, as I said, they are an Eastern Rite church in communion with Rome, but not connected to Greece in any particular way.
This is one of the
Yeah.
Yeah, I
things.
just was wondering because like my grandfather, it was just about God, and Ukraine, it was God, uh his family and Ukraine, which I beg to differ whichever came first, but it was odd to see that come out in him, being Americanized, because my dad was like, no, like, don't. And it was Oma and Opa, and so it was like all this stuff I learned as I went along, because I just was led to believe that I went to church with my Canadian mother, who is Roman Catholic, and I knew my grandfather went to church, and I just in my young mind figured, well, we're all Catholic,
Well, and you were
and
right. You were all Catholic. If you are Ukrainian Greek Catholic or Roman Catholic, you can receive communion at the other church. It's all part of the same Catholic Church.
they're very
Yeah.
different procedures, though, which I learned the hard way, and I
Yeah.
still think about late at night and cringe about to this day, because it was just because I needed. That was where my grandfather was. It was a small church here, and he was just always there after my grandmother passed, and her funeral, like, he's buried in the church's cemetery, and my grandmother was German, and I'm just like, kind of like, I chuckled to myself because I wasn't able to go to her funeral because my son was a baby, and you don't bring babies, but I see the pictures, and all the flowers were yellow and blue, and it was just like, and even finding her, like, because my mom said they made a big deal about, as far as the Roman Catholic cemetery and those things, but it's hard to wrap my head around, and to really, it plays a big part, though, in my understanding what afflicted my grandfather, that it just hurt when I found out, and that's when I started, and I guess it was like leading up to preparing me to do catching up, because the culture was not front and center. It was
Well,
more German. It
just
was,
just
and
just American. If I can break in here, this is one of the things I love about Volya Radio. There are so many people like you, just American, who discover roots and who look back in time to, in a way, reconnect with their own personal histories by learning more about the history of Ukraine, the history of Eastern Europe, and the history of the pain you talk about, frankly. And this is the pain of Russian aggression
yes,
against Ukraine for hundreds of years now. So I do want to thank you,
You
Just
know,
American, for coming up and and
Oh,
adding to our conversation.
You know,
Robin?
Alan,
this is
I'd
a
like to just
podcast I
add
watched
too,
on
if you
screen.
want to know more about Ukrainian history, do consider coming to our book club on Sunday nights and going back in the broadcast on Spotify, because we've read a number of books on Ukrainian history that it might,
Oh, I do. I listen to them on Spotify because I don't
terrific.
like, I'm a visual person with schedules and like to be like, oh, Tuesday is, so I do. I have listened in the accidental Ukraine, and also because that title speaks to me, just because I felt so sad that nobody, I mean, there's not much of us and we weren't raised in the culture, but nobody cared enough what he went through, which is sad to me, because that's the type of thing that is missing. And I get met with, oh, you can't live in the past by, my American family. And I get it. Like, I have a lot on my plate right now, but I mean, my dad passed, my mom has Alzheimer's, and I'm trying to fix a house with a fire. But it's like, this is not something that can be turned off, because
Yeah,
my
I
grandfather
think
was so.
just American. I think a lot of us have this. You know, many people in the United States are from immigrant families, and what happened for a lot of families was that as people came in, there was, first of all, pressure to be American, to acculturate, and there was a feeling that they wanted to provide their children with the ability to be totally American, and some families held on to traditions, but a lot of them did not. And it's not always, it's I think people, you're often sad that you didn't know more about the culture of your family when you were a kid, but it's not, I wouldn't feel too bad about it. I think a lot of families made that choice, and now you can discover it. I know, certainly I don't come from a Ukrainian family, but boy, have I had a wonderful time discovering Ukrainian culture and language and everything in the last few years. So rather than worrying about, you're not being in the past. You're aiming for the future by learning about an important place and about something that's important to you. So back to you, Alan.
Thanks, Robin. And again, thanks, Just American. We do have a lot of news to cover here on Volya Radio tonight. And, this might well be a good way, Robin, to segue into a memory that is very important in Ukraine today. Anniversaries in Ukraine are important. Anniversaries that have everything to do with Ukraine's self-defense against Russia are especially important. And today, and I'm sure that a lot of our listeners will actually remember this, but today is the fourth anniversary of a horrifying Russian war crime, and this was the Russian um, murder of 50 Ukrainian prisoners of war who were in a transit prison outside Donetsk city in a prison called Olenivka, and the Russians uh, destroyed this barracks in which. Um, there were hundreds of Ukrainian POWs who, by the way, had been guaranteed safe passage by the Russians in a negotiated exit that I think the Red Cross had something to do with. But the Russians destroyed the building where the Ukrainian POWs were being held. At least 50 were killed, hundreds were injured, and hundreds still remain in captivity, Robin.
Yeah, that's right. These were defenders from the siege of Mariupol, from who came from Azovstal, and yeah, the UN, I'm not the UN, the International Red Cross was able to make a roster of who had been taken by the Russians, but they were never allowed into the camp. The Russians, and any question about whether or not the Russians tried to say that, oh, the Ukrainians did it with the HIMARS, and that has been, was completely debunked. Didn't have any of the markings of what would have happened if the HIMARS had hit anything. Also, it is been established that the Russians, before this happened, they moved these prisoners from a different location. They moved them to a separate building in a different area of the prison, and then it was blown up. They After this happened, they blocked. There were medics in among the medics from Azovstal. The Russians blocked them from helping people. They didn't give any kind of medical help to people who were who were injured. I mean, just a horrific. And the Red Cross was never able to get in to see what the conditions were. And the International Red Cross is a useless organization. It's about as useless as the UN at this point. But they were never able to get in. Many of these prisoners are still being held. There are still prisoners from who were taken. And when did Mariupol fall? That was um, May. Okay, it was May 2022. There are still prisoners from who were probably at Olenivka. There's certainly still prisoners from Azovstal who have not been released yet. This was as Alan said, this was a massive war crime, and a quite transparent war crime. There's no international body that's looked at this even begins to believe any of the crap that the Russians are spewing about this. And the Russians, as I said, no one was ever allowed in. They have the area where it happened has been well, destroyed mostly. There's no evidence would be left at this point, even if someone were able to get in to look at it. But this was one of the first of the incalculable number of war crimes and genocide that the Russians have been involved in since the full scale invasion, and actually since before. So there today in Kyiv, there was a huge memorial gathering, and I'm sure other places in Ukraine also.
And when you say incalculable number of war crimes, Robin, Ukraine is investigating 230,000 war crimes committed by the Russians in occupied Ukraine and in the course of their full-scale genocidal invasion. Some of these war crimes have resulted in indictments, as we know, uh, of Vladimir Putin, of Maria Lvova-Belova, and this, of course, is the war crime of abducting more than 20,000 Russian children. Let's welcome James
Ukrainian
Healy.
children. Ukrainian.
Did I say Russian children? Good Lord.
No, it's easy to do. I do that all the time too. But yeah, just wanted to make sure
You,
people are clear.
thank you, Robin. Ukrainian children. This is what happens on live radio. You often misspeak. James Healy, welcome, and please go ahead.
Well, it especially happens when you don't have a teleprompter, which I know you do, Alan, but never mind. We don't. Just wanted to add to this that this is one of the cases that, well, first of all, this is outrageous that they're claiming that it was a HIMARS that hit this. And what they did apparently was sprinkle bits of HIMARS explosives around the prison to quote unquote prove it, and it didn't prove it to anybody, honestly. But the gullible, the people who are ready to already say yes, this was done by somebody else. It must have been those darned Americans or Ukrainians, and this is such a big case that it is one of several cases that a couple of groups well, I'll say NGOs got together, including the one that Peter Pomerantz founded. and the other group I can't remember the name of. I apologize, or the people, but they put together a report called Manufacturing Impunity, and they go through in extreme detail what happened in these 5 different cases. Another one, for example, was the Kakhovka Dam getting blown up. Uh, these are huge fake stories from Russia. This is how they do it. They are meant to be exemplars. They're real cases that are headed to the tribunal, I'm sure, if not other courts. And what I would say to you is if you're interested in having a deep dive about what free speech limits there are in the world, this is a good example of it. Of course, some people can lie with impunity anytime, anywhere. But other places have these laws in place, and Europe is one of those. And so the tribunal is set up in Europe, and it will be able to prosecute these cases. And what you'll see is that there are a lot of bits of evidence that they do not detail. They tell some, they hide most. And that's because it's a real court case, and it will go to court or to that tribunal. So, anyways, I'll pop it into the nest. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, James. Yeah, that's one of the things we have to keep on remembering with all of this is Ukraine and Friends of Ukraine are working not only at right now on what's going on in the war, but also in preparing documentation for war crimes tribunals. Our friends at the Humanitarian Research Lab at Yale do a tremendous job with documenting things so that when they manage to get their hands on the perpetrators of this stuff, there will be good solid court cases to go on. So as I said, I mean, this is the thing in general. There are a lot of unanswered questions at this point, which we just have to cope with because not everything can be released right now. Alan, back to you.
Thanks, Robin. The second tweet up in the nest right now, and I will actually move it into first place as we go through the show. But right now, the second tweet is a link for listeners to tap on and contribute to War Doggo and a fundraiser that is vitally important. And a day like today is a good day to make such a contribution. So much about the war is present with us every day. In evacuations of children and elderly Ukrainians in frontline cities, we see these reports. We watch videos that I honestly don't recommend everyone watch by any means. We read the news stories of the day and collect our thoughts to bring them to you, listeners here at Volya Radio. But the other thing we do is we keep track of contributions to fundraisers that make a difference to Ukraine. And one in particular, the fundraising that War Doggo does um, and that we support here at Volya Radio. A number of us have had the opportunity to meet War Doggo in person. All of us here rely on War Doggo to help us understand what is happening in Ukraine when from time to time we don't have clarity. But War Doggo always has clarity, and his fundraising is always effective. So that tweet is the second in the nest. The reason I say today is a good day to contribute, of course, is because it is the fourth anniversary of this terrible war crime the Russians committed outside Donetsk City in Olenivka, and it is remembered in Ukraine, Robin. And quite frankly, when you especially look at what's happening in Kyiv, this kind of remembrance, together with the the protests on the street about Fedorov's dismissal, about the reshuffling of the Ukrainian government, it all comes together. Um, I don't think that we're going to see these protests dwindle anytime soon.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they will dwindle when it is clear that the government has taken the right path to the future. And what people are looking for is continue the innovation, continue the caring about saving individual Ukrainian lives, the soldiers on the front line, and continuing for a sustainable, real peace. I just wanted to mention, and Alan, thank you so much for putting that, for mentioning that fundraiser. People who listen, you you may wonder why we have War Doggos fundraiser up so often, and it really is because, as Alan said, a number of us have had the incredible privilege of being able to meet War Doggo. I've met with him several times. He's an unusual human being. I mean, if you have any questions about things, go take a look at his feed. He documents on Twitter every cent that goes into his fundraisers, what he's gotten for them, where the things have gone. And if you look at the numbers, it's astonishing. The deals he gets for things, and he goes all over Europe, Poland and Lithuania and all sorts of places, gets the things that the guys on the front line need, but not just gets them to them, has all the logistics down, gets things to them quickly, but gets an incredible price often. And why this fundraiser that we've been had this one up for months, the proactive fundraiser. What's different about this is that Bordogo was finding that very often, and we've seen this, very often the guys from SBU Alpha, the special operators, incredible special operators in Ukraine, or the electronic warfare unit of the 18th Sloviansk Brigade of the National Guard would come to him and say, "We have a really urgent need," and at that point. Okay, let's talk to people at Volya Radio. Let's get a fundraiser going, and we'd come on, and you guys would really step up. I mean, Volya Radio listeners have been incredible in supporting these fundraisers. But it still could end up taking a month to 2 months to get this critically needed material to the guys who requested it. And I think, War Doggo especially, I mean, he's got a big heart, and I think it really disturbed him that he wasn't able to provide the stuff immediately. And he talked with, a number of us, and we all had the same feeling. If they need it today, let's get it to them today. So I know there's some things coming up that War Doggo will be talking about in the next few weeks. There's a constant need for vehicles for these guys at the front line. So take a look at the post, and you'll see some of the latest things that has provided to SBU Alpha. Things that they have trouble getting because the Ukrainian government tries to do its best, but they have to be sure the weaponry is there first of all. So a lot of the other stuff that is necessary, they're not as able to provide, and so that's our job. And anyway, take a look, see if you can free up a few dollars. We have last year, Alan, we raised over $100,000 for the various charities that we platform. We don't touch any of the money ourselves. We let you know fundraisers that we have looked into, we vetted, and we know are legit. But that $100,000, that wasn't because we had a couple of fat cats who came and gave $10,000 each. The majority of the donations for that added up to an incredible amount of money. I think we're probably under $50, 50, 100, 150, lots of fives and tens and 25s. And because there's so many of our listeners did everything they could, we were able to really make a big difference. And we've gotten thank yous. We get thank yous from the guys that we help, telling us about what they've done and telling us, a couple of times they've said, we see your donations have literally saved lives. They talk about specific things that they were able to do because of our aid. So, okay, I'm going to stop now. If I thought I could harangue you for 20 minutes and get more donations out of you, I would. But I think our listeners are all adults. They're all committed to Ukraine, and this is what we need to do. So if you can, please take a look. Back to you, Alan. Let's go back to the news.
Well, I just do want to say, Robin, Volya Radio is a tiny platform, but we lift above our weight, um, and we always have, and I think that we always will. Um, there are nights here with you, especially Robin, uh, when. Uh, when special fundraisers come up, usually from War Doggo, and sometimes War Doggo is with us right here. But on those nights, the listeners of Volya Radio come through in a way that I would challenge anyone online to equal. And there are just a few of us. None of us are wealthy, uh, and we all find Ukraine in our hearts, and we show it. So, and just to go back into the news a little bit, and this is a challenging news to talk about, Robin, but I think it is going to be one of the most significant. Well, one of the most significant, I'll call it a statistic for the moment. It's not really a statistic. When Ukrainian civilians are killed and wounded in their homes throughout Ukraine, that's not a statistic. It is a war crime of Russian terror. But this summer has become the most lethal for Ukrainian civilians throughout Ukraine, not just in Kyiv, but in Kharkiv and in Kherson. Kharkiv is a frontline city. Kherson is where Russian drone pilots practice uh, killing civilians. That is what they do with their drones over the streets of Kherson. And Russia is trying to creep closer and closer to frontline cities like Kharkiv, like Kramatorsk, like Sloviansk, also Zaporizhia and Dnipro, to creep closer in order to make them uh, easier to strike with drones, but also to bring them within artillery range. So this has resulted in a terrible toll of civilian life in Ukraine this summer. And the reason I bring this up, Robin, is to think about one word. It is the word escalation. Russia is escalating this war throughout the summer, and Ukraine is meeting the escalation with escalation.
Yeah, and as many people have pointed, I think it was Zelenskyy, but other people have said too. Anything that Ukraine does at this point, any attacks on Russia, these are all these. This is none of this is escalation. This is an appropriate response to the aggressor. I wanted to I have an article here. It's in the last day. Russia has killed 9 Ukrainians. In a day, there wasn't a massive attack on Kyiv, and unfortunately, I care about Kyiv a lot. It's a beautiful city. It's very close to my heart. But this goes on a daily basis. 9 killed, 70 injured, as strikes on gas stations continue. And gas stations, the Russians are mad because they don't have enough gas themselves. But gas stations in Ukraine are a very special thing. It's much more than just a place to get gas. They really are almost social gathering places, and they have been targeting them, knowing that there are going to be a lot of people there, and and people just trying to get gas, get a coffee, wherever they're going. I just want to read just so people know, because it's always important, in my opinion, to remember the individuals rather than numbers. In Donetsk, 4 people were killed and 19 were injured over the past day. In Kherson, 3 people were killed and 10 were injured. In Kharkiv Oblast, 1 was killed and 12 others injured. In the regional capital of Kharkiv, Two people were left with acute stress reactions, and a 49-year-old man, 46-year-old woman were injured. Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, one person was killed and seven injured. And in Zaporizhia Oblast, 14 people were injured. Sumy Oblast, six. So you see, it's all over. And this is on a down day. You know what I mean? This is a day that we tend to think, oh, yeah, no massive attacks. Even on days when there are no massive attacks, and this is why it's adding up, Alan, so much now. Is long range drone missiles and drones are killing innocent Ukrainian civilians. And I would say any Ukrainian is innocent all the way up to the head of the military, because nobody would be doing any would there would no one would be attacking Russians if the Russians hadn't started this. So I consider every Ukrainian to be innocent. But this is what goes on a day that there is no massive attacks. I just wanted to cite those numbers so that we remember, that this is the daily experience of Ukraine.
Yeah, and of course, it is as true today as it has been for over 1,600 days of Russia's full-scale genocidal invasion of Ukraine. It's true today that uh, this invasion would come to an end if Russia would simply go home and leave Ukraine alone. But there appears to be no likelihood of that, Robin. But before we get to some news from inside Russia, just a reflection about the Russian attacks on gas stations in Ukraine. And some of these are with drones, some of these are with glide bombs, but they are all concentrated between Kharkiv and west of Kharkiv along major highways of Ukraine. So, uh, and this is not only because Ukraine has taken out 40 or 60% of Russia's ability to refine crude oil. This actually appears to be a campaign by Russia to isolate Kharkiv in a way. In other words, if you can't get gas on your way to Kharkiv, it makes Kharkiv vulnerable. Vulnerable to who? Because Ukraine has successfully stopped Russia at the border between Kharkiv and Sumy. But Putin is apparently preparing for a vast mobilization in Russia, maybe 500,000. Also, it appears that Russia is negotiating with Korea to bring 30,000 or 50,000 additional North Korean trained, hardened troops into Ukraine. That is why these attacks on gas stations west of Kharkiv actually are so important. Robin, back to you. And then I just love that Will Teal, on his second cup of coffee, has come to join us.
Yes, I think since Will is awake and has his hand up, I think we'll go right to him. Good morning, Will.
Have you got a camera in here? Anyway, so yeah, I think that they may think they're doing that, Alan, isolating Kharkiv that way, but the truth is, you can blow up the forecourt and the Bowsers and everything like that, but unless you have a ground penetrating munition, they haven't blown up the tanks, and all they simply need. Well, I don't. I guess I'm not telling our FSB friends, if there's anybody in here, that Ukraine can still use those petrol stations. They're just gonna secret the means, the drop line they'll put into them to pump them out and fill them out the back in a shed that doesn't look like a petrol. Yeah, it'll slow them down, but they're not going to. And remember how quickly once they move on to something else, remember how quickly Ukraine rebuilds petrol stations? There was that one in, I don't know, Kramatorsk or someplace that they hit with a drone, and literally 24 hours they had it up with all of the signage and everything again, looked brand new. So this is Russia's lame ass attempt to try to mirror what Ukraine is doing to oil and fuel depots, strategic reserves in that country. This is their idea of a response. It's like well, it's going to have very little effect long term, and there are workarounds short term. Is my view.
Yeah, thanks, Will. You know, it's there's absolutely no strategery, as they call it, in what the Russians are doing, and I think you're right. It's their attempt to let's get back at the Ukrainians because we have long lines at our gas stations. But as you're saying, this causes this causes problems for Ukrainian civilians, but it's not going to have any effect on the front line, and it's not going to really have any effect on Russian losing this war in the end.
Yeah, the only place I've seen it have any positive effect for Russia is on the goddamn news again, because they keep reporting things in Ukraine as Russia's doing this in response to attacks inside Ukraine, Russia. And as you said at the beginning, there is no response of anything to Russia Ukraine does. Everything Ukraine does is a response to the invasion of Russia. Right? You are allowed under the laws of warfare to use any and all means, any and all weapons, up to nuclear weapons, chemical and biological weapons, to expel these assholes from your country. And that includes attacks inside their country to minimize their military effectiveness. And anybody not putting that in context on the news, as I was shouting about yesterday, is simply feeding into the Russian narrative, and they like to do this one because they were trying to figure out, oh, why would they be attacking gas stations? Oh, it must be in response to these fuel attacks over here. But those fuel attacks in Russia are strategic, military valuable targets. These are simply trying to kill people at petrol stations and cause inconvenience, even though they might try to call it disruption. It's going to be inconvenience at most.
Yeah, Will, I think I agree with you. It will be inconvenience. You can't get that hot dog at the gas station.
Yeah, that's the big problem,
Yeah,
really.
well, it is a delicacy, and I will say it's a delicacy I have yet to try in Ukraine. I just can't bring myself to do it, but I will when I get back.
Oh, you have to, you have
Not
to,
even
and they
fed
have
one of
them
the
on the
Brahmas. Come
trains
on,
too.
man.
Yeah, they have them on the trains too. Will actually got me a hot dog on the train to Kyiv, and it was wonderful.
Well, a hot.
Not as good as the servo ones though. Get an authentic servo hot dog in a bread tube.
Okay. I'll speak to our friend from Ivano-Frankivsk. He has neglected that part of my education. I've never actually. But the one time we went past a gas station, I was car sick, so I couldn't indulge. But we'll have to make sure we get there next time.
Well, okay, I will. I'll indulge, but just back uh, to escalation. And I have to find another word to talk about what I feel is happening in the war this summer, Will, and that is uh, an increase in intensity, more attacks of all kinds. Of course, it's great to see Ukraine launching hundreds of drones every single night against targets inside Russia. This apparently is something that Russians never dreamed Ukraine would be able to do. And now Ukraine is able to do it routinely. Thank goodness. But the war on the ground, the war in the air, the disinformation war, the diplomatic war, the tactical war on the front line, the strategic war that Ukraine is waging, it's getting hotter and more intense as the summer goes on. Don't you think that this is a summer of escalation, Will?
Yeah, look, I agree. Russia has to be able to report some success, and Russia is literally under reflexive control by Ukraine. When they get hit hard, they have to strike back at whatever they can get. If it's fuel terminals, they can only find gas stations. That's what they hit. If they're ramping up the escalation of the strategic attacks, and this is, I guess, what I'd call it the front lines is this is what passes for a summer offensive, just the escalation of the types of attacks. You're no more effect, but this is what passes for a summer offensive.
And there has been a zero summer offensive by Russia. Uh, any possibility of a summer offensive by Russia was actually crushed all the way back in April. And it was obvious by the end of April that Russia would not be able to launch a summer offensive as it has in the last 3 summers in Ukraine. And that also means there's not going to be a fall offensive launched by Russia in Ukraine. In fact, I think that Ukraine will be able to increase pressure on Russian positions on the zero line and quite possibly uh, force Russians to give up positions. I'm not talking about some kind of Ukrainian counteroffensive and breakthrough. Rather, I'm just thinking about a kind of pressure cooker that Ukraine can create not only on the zero line, but around Crimea and therefore around Kherson and much of southern occupied Ukraine. The Russians will have to give up positions. That's my hope.
I don't agree. I mean, I don't disagree. There are locations where they are definitely faced with encirclement, capture, or because they can't fire back in some cases. The Russians are complaining about supply and the cutting them off at the knees in April. Well, starting in April, that didn't allow for any effective summer offensive is the mid range strikes. So as long as the mid range strikes can continue and are effective, it will limit Russia's effectiveness of mounting any sort of campaign, even if they mobilize a bunch of people, a bunch more meat, because meat without guns and bullets, as Chuck said, are hobos.
Yeah, I think that is the real issue, that this so-called mobilization, that a bunch of bodies, and we know how well the Russians train these guys. What was it? I think is it 48 hours is the average time that people survive on the front line once they're sent to the front by the Russians. So I mean, the bottom line probably is, as long as Ukraine has enough weaponry to mow these guys down as they advance, that's going to be a lot of the issue. The problem, of course, is, as we know, even if it's 1 to 10, 10 dead Russians for 1 Ukrainian, that's still one person that we want to save, and this is going to be that really is going to be the issue, with Ukraine may need to get more people on the front line just in order to have enough coverage to hold back the meat waves.
Well, I think that Russian mobilization, however many uh, soldiers that Putin's going to mobilize this fall, and we don't know if he will succeed with that mobilization or if this mobilization will indeed create protests against Putin in Russia. We don't know any of that, but you know, yeah, can the 500,000 new recruits in Russia be armed, be trained, and be deployed against Ukraine in one wave? It would take months and months and months, wouldn't it, Will?
Yeah, well, if you did it the appropriate way, it would take months and months and months. In the background, it's been pointed out though that the summer offensive, Alan, was the 28 tank loss day near Dobrapilya. The Russia did mount one significant sized armored assault this summer so far. It was about 10 days ago, and it didn't get anywhere near the Ukrainian lines after being spotted. And it was dealt with in the way that they've been dealing with those since Avdiivka. And mostly people have given up. But yes, there was one significant armored assault. I guess I'll call that the summer offensive.
I think that was the second armored assault, as I recall. Sometime back in June, the Russians attempted an armored assault out of Chasiv Yar towards Kostyantynivka. So yeah, a total of 18 tanks, all destroyed in a couple of armored assaults. That, I guess, is the culmination of Russia's summer offensive. I also wonder, Will, Russia, like Ukraine, is looking for a way to integrate drones tactically with infantry on the zero line. And I don't think either Ukraine or Russia has quite figured it out, but they are both trying to. And this attack through Doperpelia, one analysis I saw suggested that Russia tried to use drones as a kind of air cover that would permit that mechanized column going forward. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think they're both practicing, even since Kursk, right, with the means of using drones to support infantry advance. Um, and the real way that I think Ukraine has developed a capability here is using their advantage with the Vampir drones, the heavy lift drones, to be able to affect the kind of occupation and holding of territory north of Huliapoli that they've done as report. And if Ukraine is phenomenally quiet about the advances up there. They're letting Russia tell the story there, or not tell the story, to feed right into their false buying stuff on credit. When Ukraine takes something back up there, they don't report it right away, so that the Russians have to either eat crow and tell the up higher ups that they've lost positions, or they won't get any artillery and close air support, or go without it. And way Ukraine has reportedly done that from the Russian side, they've reported that the Ukrainian infantry infiltrates the way the Russians do. They blanket the area, well, as much as they can, with first person drones. They help their infantry achieve whatever position in distance they're intending to make, and let those people quickly uh, fortify as quickly as they can the positions that they capture, and then they literally drop them in heavy weapons, the little small grenade launchers, the tripod grenade launchers, the little 40 mils, and heavy machine guns, and lots of bullets, lots of water, lots of everything. And when the Russians try to re-infiltrate and take back those positions, as has been happening, uh, they're carrying everything that they own with them. They're not dropping them in anything. They're having to walk all the way the 10, 15 kilometers with everything they own. And I'll remind you, it's 35 degrees Celsius there too. And when they show up, they're basically in no condition to fight. And Ukraine is able to hold them off in the new positions. So they're consolidating small territorial gains using drones and drone support. And but I'm sure Ukraine and Russia are both attempting to find new ways that they can use drones. And this is just an iteration of what we've seen before, right? In 2022, I was unbelievably amazed at how well Ukraine could use Mavic drones for spotting and adjusting artillery. It was, magic. If you know anything about people firing mortars, they were able to really, really move and adjust fire incredibly well. Some of the first Yaga Yaga videos were actually that activity, and they've moved on from there. So up until the Kursk offensive, we saw them using drones as close air support, as first-person attack drones, as ISR drones, and now we see another evolution where they're using them for heavy lift support, like you would do with helicopters or something like that in for air assault. And that, it's interesting, these units that are in north of Huliopoli, the three main Ukrainian units there are air assault units, but they're not dropping the guys. They're just carrying in the weapons and dropping them.
Yeah, Chuck and I are going to take a look at the Huliopole map tomorrow and some other maps, and we'll get those reports up on YouTube on the Indications and Warnings channel there later this week. We do have a lot to talk about, and exactly as Will pointed out, I know one of the things Chuck will mention is that what Ukraine has succeeded in doing, in particular this summer, is forcing the Russians to drop off any assault troops farther and farther and farther from their jump off points. I'm not going to use the term zero line because I don't think a zero line exists any longer anywhere in Ukraine. There is a kill zone, a gray zone. I understand Boris Johnson spent 90 minutes in the kill zone for a documentary. uh, this is four times the length of time that a Russian soldier is expected to live in the kill zone. And so I find that somewhat remarkable that Boris, in his armor, succeeded in doing that. And time and the kill.
The man is such a character. I mean, even if people don't like his politics, or he really is very funny sometimes.
Well,
Sorry.
he is funny. I'll say one thing about Boris Johnson. Uh, he has a bit of Churchill's daring, apparently, in him, uh, and that it's something to see because they share that kind of rotund body. You don't expect them to move quickly enough uh, to escape fire on the zero line.
And he actually has written a wonderful book on Churchill. If he's Boris Johnson turns out to be quite a good writer. I read his book on Churchill. I don't remember the name of it now, but a couple of years ago, and it's really worth the time. Anyway, but sorry to distract. Back to you.
No, Volya Radio is both about distraction and about focus. I've been accused of having ADHD here as a host on Volya Radio. Where am I going to go next? I never know, Robin. A lot of it has to do with what you say or Will says or someone else who jumps up to speak here on Volya Radio. And see longtime listeners who I would invite to come up. One thing we haven't really taken the pulse of tonight, Robin, and Lexicon might be able to help us do this, but it is the protests in Ukraine. Yes, we know that there were some ongoing protests in Kyiv and other cities around Ukraine, primarily focused on Fedorov, but also calling for the Rada to come back into session. Um, I guess what we'll see maybe over the next 10 days is whether or not these protests regather strength and focus um, and make Zelensky uncomfortable, I guess, in a way, right?
Yeah, it would. Yeah, it's going. This next period of time is going to be very interesting. I think I don't. It could things could transpire in so many different ways. It's impossible to predict, but definitely keep on watching.
Well, one thing probably to watch is what Fedorov is going to do. I guess the expectation is that Fedorov is going to disappear, and I don't think that he is that kind of guy.
Yeah, I it is going to be interesting. I think he has made a point, which I think is true, is that in government he won't have the ability to push through the changes he's trying to make unless he is defense minister. But I don't think he's going to, slink off back into the private sector either. It'll be interesting where he ends up if it isn't in government. I think we're going to be hearing a lot from him. And also, there's an interesting thing. One of the things that some of the Ukrainian journalists have pointed out is Fedorov, Zelensky, in trying to sideline Fedorov, has created a powerful opponent. Fedorov is extremely popular, much more popular now than he was before this all started. I mean, he was popular to start with, but his popularity has eclipsed. Budanov and Zelensky. I think it might even have eclipsed Zaluzhny. We'll see what happens. That's a short term thing, but it's Ukrainian democracy is a great spectator sport. It's always interesting and always exciting, and good things are always happening. So yeah, just fasten your seatbelt and we'll keep on watching.
I think one thing to point out about the protests occurring throughout Ukraine in support of Fedorov uh, is their generational makeup. These are younger Ukrainians, primarily, who are out in the streets supporting Fedorov and his vision for a very rapid conversion, not only of Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian defense industry and the Ukrainian military, but a transformation of Ukrainian society itself, so that Ukrainian society finally does break free of a Soviet past. That indeed is the goal of Ukraine's war of independence. This is really what its self defense amounts to. And I think Fedorov is bringing to attention for everyone, not just in Ukraine, but around the world. There are at least two ways Ukraine has to achieve this domestically and on the zero line.
Yep. I don't have a comment on that. I think you're absolutely right, and it's as I said, we're going. It's going to be. We'll want to keep an eye on things in the next few months.
And we will. I do think Fedorov is a remarkably compelling figure in Ukraine right now, and it will be interesting to see what happens, where he goes, what he says, what he does. Um, and I know there's a backstory to everything that's happened in the last few weeks. None of us are privy to that backstory. It probably won't be revealed for years. And
Yeah, that's right.
yeah, I mean,
No, I keep on saying I hope I live long enough to find out what the hell's been going on. Another Simon Schuster in another 10 years will be telling us all of the what Budanov was actually up to behind the line, behind the scenes and everything else. Anyway, uh, I just wanted to mention, Alan, I did throw up in the nest a wonderful article from the Kyiv Independent by our friend Andrew Shahoyan about it's a lot has to do a lot with Russian disinformation and the language that is used and how insidious it can be and how it can create problems. I don't think we're going to discuss this at length tonight. I have a call into Andrew. Hopefully, we'll be able to get him on in the next few days to talk about this. But this article, I just wanted to refer people to because it's really worth your time to read it through and think about it. And hopefully, we'll have Andrew on in a few days to talk about it.
yeah, I read it earlier today and really want to spend time with you and Andrew talking about it more in depth. Will Teal, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I mean, and that article that everybody should read, segues directly from what I'm talking about, what I was talking about earlier with the Russians are superb at planting language in the discussions and then just acting as if they belong there permanently so that other people get to using that language, all the way back from the Ukraine or the gas stations attacks or the Anchorage agreements. There were no Anchorage agreements,
Or the war in Ukraine, the Ukrainian
right.
war.
They plant these sayings in the language, and if you don't object to them each and every time when they try to do it, then they become part of the environment where people are talking, and they are fundamentally completely false narratives that they've encapsulated in words. Russia spends $1.8 billion a year on disinformation campaigns, and a lot of that on budget, and a lot of that is specifically to come up with language and little narratives and idioms that they can plug into things and get used by Western media that support their side of the way talking. So yeah, language is warfare for Russia, and they try to do this on purpose. These aren't accidents.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we have to be so careful not to fall into using I can't think of another one, but well, there's
Well,
the NATO
mobilization is
proxy
another good one.
mobilization. Yeah, there are a lot of
They've
words.
ruined mobilization, and that's why I won't say mobilization in Ukraine. The Ukraine should make a concerted effort to take language back and use their own language. We're doing conscription to make a difference between what Russia's doing. Russia is, vacuuming people up off the streets. 48 hours later, they're standing in Ukraine. That's mobilization. Conscription means random selection, recruitment through screening, basic training. It means a whole different thing in Ukraine. And so every opportunity that you've got, you should negate the Russian language narrative and come up with something else to put in its place, so that when you talk about something, you can make an efficient argument about something without having to rely on words that Russia wants you to use.
Well, Will, mobilization uh, is a uniquely Russian word. It's also a last century word. It's what the czars did to fight wars in the 19th and 20th century. And you're completely right. It has nothing to do with how Ukraine is trying to recruit and enlist or conscript Ukrainians to fight in the military. Mobilization is a tactic of a dictator. And that's what Vladimir Putin is. And that is what Russia is. It is an autocracy, a totalitarian society. Only totalitarian societies can mobilize ordinary citizens and enforce uh, their use as soldiers. This is Russia to a T.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's we're dealing. One of the things that it's important to emphasize to people is that we're dealing with the Russian Empire here. There's nothing has changed substantially since the time of the czars. They put a different, they overlaid a political system on top of the empire, but the empire is the bottom line, and that has not changed. And we're still dealing. Putin is technically called president, not czar, but that's about the only difference.
The only difference, for sure. I mean, the president, except for Medvedev, he's been president since what, 1999 or something like that, Robin? But
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
yeah, but in other words, there are Russians who have known no other leader of their country but Vladimir Putin. Um, we're, Here I am, as usual, 15 minutes short of news that I really actually know something
Oh,
about,
oh well,
Robin.
I've got a few other things that we haven't talked about yet, so we can go on with that if you would like.
I would very much like that.
Okay, the first is there are one positive, one negative. Actually, we'll start with the positive one first. Ukraine is reporting that they have managed to get a further 50 children out of the clutches of the Russians. They've been returned to Ukraine. Some children, some teenage boys who, as we know, that it becomes really critical once they reach 18. The Russians do their best to push them into the military. They seems to get a particularly perverse pleasure out of throwing Ukrainian kids into the military to fight against their own people. But so it's 50 kids have come back. As you mentioned before, Alan, we're talking about hundreds of thousands more, well, tens of thousands more, but at least there's some. Now the other big issue, which well, we'll see what happens, is this rash and escalating, unfortunately, series of attacks in Poland on Ukrainian. Well, I would say Ukrainian refugees on Ukrainians in Poland, not necessarily even refugees. There've been a couple of Poles who've been brutalized because some idiot thought that they were Ukrainian. There's a video that was up on the social media in the last day of a man and woman, 21-year-old guy, 20-year-old woman, who these three thugs. I mean, they just look like skinheads. They just go up to them as they're trying to get in their car and beat the crap out of them. They both ended up with concussions. The woman ended up having to get stitches in her neck. I mean, it's a horrific video, and this has been happening more and more frequently all over Poland. Donald Tusk, Sikorski and Tusk, the two of them have come out pretty forcefully against this. Tusk has specifically today finally called directly on Karol Nawrocki, the president who is, I'm sorry, is responsible for a lot of this because of his rhetoric, has called on Nawrocki to publicly speak out against this. There've been protests by the Ukrainian government, of course. I mean, it's a horrific thing. People telling, Ukrainians telling their children to not speak so loudly in public because someone might hear them speaking Ukrainian. This is it. It seems to be coming to a head. I'm glad to see Polish politicians who are really speaking out against this. But it's at this point, it's a very dangerous situation. And I know Ukrainians. I was speaking with somebody the other day. She was going on vacation, going to Bulgaria for vacation. She's going way out of her way to go through Moldova, so she doesn't have to go through Poland. This is the situation has gotten from, and it breaks my heart because I have a lot of admiration for Poland, and Poland covered themselves in glory in the first days of the full scale invasion. I will never forget those trucks, truck after truck after truck, with on the side of each truck it said Poland first to help, and they were the first to help. They helped before anyone else. While everybody else was trying to decide whether it was worth it to send anything in because the Russians are probably going to take over in a couple of days anyway, Poland was there. And it's frightening because if you know anything about what happened when Hitler came to power in Germany. It's nobody thought it was going to happen. It just things got out of control. I don't think that's going to happen in Poland. I hope to God it doesn't. I think that the Poles are much more on top of the situation, and the economic situation is not what it was in Germany. But it's a very disturbing thing, and I just wanted to keep people up to date about that. As I said, I'm hoping now that Tusk particularly has handed this back to Novorotsky to do something about it, that maybe he will finally come out and make a statement, try to damp this down. Anyway, whatever.
Well,
Back to you.
Robin, is it possible that some of these attacks on Ukrainians, literally on buses and in the streets of Poland, is it possible these attacks are actually being paid for by Russia? In other words, finding what I'm going to call Polish thugs and handing them 10 euros.
Yeah, it's I have not seen reporting about that, but especially these skinhead types, um, it would make sense. And certainly, Russia has been pouring massive amounts of money into Poland in disinformation campaigns. I saw somewhere, I don't remember the exact number, but that Russia in a year spends it's over $1 billion. I don't remember the exact number because I'm terrible with numbers, but specifically on fomenting, on disinformation and fomenting discord in countries that they would otherwise see as their opponents, and Poland is one of the big ones. So whether the money is going directly to these people or it's just going to gin them up to do this, I'm not sure, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me either. I know that we've talked here on Volya Radio about the differences between Poland and Ukraine, especially lately, and how Russia is trying to divide these two allies because Poland and Ukraine both have the same experience with Soviet occupation and with Soviet violence, and at the same time, it is an extraordinarily complicated history. I get that, um, but Russia will do everything it possibly can to divide Poland and Ukraine, and they have done it. Um, Really, for since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Robin.
Oh,
The
even way before that. I mean,
uh,
it's you see in the 19th century, on the turn of the 20th century, that the Russians, there was this massive pogrom in Lviv. The Poles turned against the Ukrainians, and of course, Jews are always in the middle because you always go after the Jews. Something is wrong. But it was substantially fomented by the Russians because, as you're saying, they always wanted to keep Ukrainians and Poles and Jews, all the um, nationalities that were subjugated by the Russians. They did their best to keep them apart. And one of the things that Timothy Snyder said once is, you have to understand about how it works. If with the Russians, if you're Jewish, they tell you the Ukrainians are all anti-Semites. If you're an anti-Semite, they tell you all Ukraine is run by Jews. And this is and Nate, take the group. You'll see the same thing with trying to convince Ukrainians. In fact, they tried this during Maidan, during the Revolution of Dignity. They tried to tell the Pravi sector, the more right-wing Ukrainians, that this was all being ginned up by Jews. They tried to tell Jews that the right wing, the so-called nationalist Ukrainians were going to massacre them the minute they got a chance. Fortunately, Ukrainians understand about Russians. They're not easily taken in other countries, and Poland, the whole should know better too. Honestly, the United States, we're a low-hanging fruit because we're so naive about this stuff.
well, it's also part of of political change in Europe. I mean, the rise of the right. I think wherever you see the rise of the right, you see a decline in honest debate and a decline in real questioning of of leaders and a decline in understanding of all kinds. So this
Yeah.
is
Uh, I'm sorry. I'm being a New Yorker again. So I finish your thought.
no. You're not being a New Yorker, and as you know, I love New York. So go ahead, Robin.
And I love Maine. Now what was I going to say? Oh, geez. Okay, just blew that out of my mind. Sorry. Back to you, Alan.
Well, that's okay. But it is very important to follow what is happening between Poland and Ukraine and what the relations between these two countries are. I think that Poland, among other EU nations, but Poland really understands how much Ukraine is needed for the defense of Europe. Will Teal.
Sorry, Alan, I
Okay.
had to step away there for a minute. It, I don't think this is necessarily. It is. These people are right wing populists, but I don't think it necessarily. It's important not to confuse right wing populist with proper conservatism,
Thank you. Yeah,
right?
that was
Because
what I was going to say. It's like leftists and liberals are two different things too. Thank you, Will.
yeah, I mean, as this war has gone on, I basically found out that I'm, uh, Teddy Roosevelt. Uh, when if you'd asked me, and people had characterized me before, my friends in Australia, basically call me godless communist. Previously, right? Because I am a big champion of progressive causes, but progressive causes that are reasonable and practical. The things that come out from the left, like the DSA in America, the Democratic Socialists, and the stuff that come out from the right wing populists are both equally total garbage, right? And while I'm a big champion still of progressive causes and recognizing the reality of things like what immigration does and doesn't do, and how you need to control the rate of flow of immigration, but not, the immigration itself or where people come from. Um, the people who think that we're going to go without a Department of Defense anywhere are laughably kidding themselves. They're going to end up digging their own graves.
Those are the same ones who want to abolish the police. Everything's going to be fine as long as we don't have law enforcement. Yeah, it's no, and then this is a very important point that you're making. There are the wackos on either side are the ones that we need to control. And this populist.
I don't want to abolish the police, but I want to abolish the police from wearing balaclavas. There's no reason you should be
Absolutely.
doing official police business and have to keep yourself secret.
No, I absolutely agree with you. Yeah, and I mean at the same time, it part of the issue with honest cops who end up being doxxed and having their home addresses circulated and whatever, that's a problem too. But that the solution is not the anonymous being masks. Yeah.
And we're not going to get into American politics because it's only July. We have so many
Thank you,
weeks to
Alan.
go, so many weeks to go before the final craziness of politics in
Yeah.
the United
Right.
States
And Mitch McConnell
overtakes.
may actually be dead by then.
Well,
Oh, I didn't say that. I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. They saved a seat for McConnell at Lindsey Graham's funeral today, but he didn't show up. Uh, look,
Oh, I'm so embarrassed. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. Jeez.
um,
But really, I'm not talking about America. I'm talking about the world. We have the same exact thing here going on with One Nation. They've got the same thing going on in Poland. Even in Ukraine, there are right wing populists who want to gin up the whole uh, violence against Poles now, right? They'd be advocating that sort of stuff. The characteristic that you can see in both the right wing populists and the left wing loonies is the failure to read. Oh, the failure to read, right? The failure to actually look at the issues in any depth, or in the DSA side. The far left has always gone in like over-reading, over-analyzing, moving into fantasy land where, like the people who've bought into the Soviet Union in the first place, that we're going to move through some transitional phase to some sort of utopia where we won't need the police and ministries of defense and all that sort of stuff. Whereas the right wing, they want to call things the Department of War, and but go back to giving people testosterone, and they're both equally idiots. What we need is, unfortunately, even if you like progressive causes, and I know you do, Alan, the you need to be able to pay for all those things. You've got host connection issues too. You need to be able to do all those things, but maintain the insurance policy of a credible defense against those who would seek to force their will upon your country. and no better example of that than Ukraine right now.
This is why I am beginning to think of you as Teddy Roosevelt will. Uh, yeah, I mean, Roosevelt was a progressive. Roosevelt was for good government, uh, and I know
And
you are
Roosevelt would
too.
hold Elon Musk's arms while I worked the body.
Jeez. Okay, so guys, we have host connection issues. So if we get dumped, we'll try to come back at least to say goodnight. But hopefully, it won't come to that. You know, one of the big issues that we see, and this talking about this, you know, this populist approach to things in Eastern Europe is unfortunately the history is very complex and everybody is guilty and everybody was a victim. You know, there's nobody comes out smelling like a rose from that period of time, especially since from World War One to the end of World War Two. But what seems to be happening is this the history is not being taught in a full way. That there are historians, Polish and Ukrainian historians, who are working together to try to really flesh out to make a narrative that incorporates everything on both sides. But what happens, I mean, clearly what has happened in Poland is that, and it's, you know, this happens, this is, you always, a country always will want to focus on its own victimhood, not on when they were the victimizers. You know, I mean, Germany actually was forced to do this by the Allies, and because of that, it's, you know, Germany is a strong democratic nation now. I don't think that's happened in Poland. Ukrainians. Were until 1991, there was just no opportunity to learn Ukrainian history. I think there's been a lot that's been that's been accomplished since then. But I think that oddly enough, I think one of the most powerful ways of fighting all of this are, you know, people like Yaroslav Hrytsak and other people at Ukrainian Catholic University. And I can't remember his name now. I met a wonderful Polish historian who was working on this too. Ugh, Mateusz somebody or other. Sorry, I'm terrible with Polish names, but this is what really has to happen. You know, they say light is the best disinfectant, and once, you know, it has to be people, once people understand, for example, Volyn, the massacre in Volyn, it was a terrible tragedy. It was a war crime, you know, but it didn't happen in isolation, and you have to understand everything that was going on around it, and look at this together, Ukrainians and Poles together, and then do what Andrzej Duda and President Zelensky tried to do, and what early generations of Poles and Ukrainians have tried to do, which was acknowledge the past and focus on the future, because the future is what we need to worry about. The more there's this focus on past resentments and past victimization. This plays right into the Russian hands, and you know there's the Russian fingerprints all over all of this stuff because of that.
Yeah, Robin, I think this is a marvelous way to bring Volya Radio to a close tonight. What you were just saying about historians and the study of history, the recognition of history, it does all come down to more light, less heat. And this is the role that historians can play right now as events are unfolding before us. Will.
Yeah, just one last point on this. As we look back to history, this comes up every year, right? Because there's an anniversary that they want to, that always comes into this. And every time there's an anniversary, Russia, the Russian influence in this always wants to go way back, right back to the past, to the issue. The important thing I think to do each time this comes up, each iteration of this, is to go back to the past, but just go back to last year or the year before that. Go back to contextualize what Russia is trying to. We expose these people basically every year for what they're doing. So when somebody's telling you something, you know, use the decoding trolls approach to it, and carve up what they're trying to do motivationally with bringing this issue up again, and make sure you focus on that, as much as the issue needs acknowledging, with the responsibility on both sides. The things that you were talking to Sharameta about, but always note the motivation for bringing up this issue and trying to pick the scab off and reignite the problem.
Yeah, I think that's 100% correct. And thank you for mentioning we had for anyone who missed it, if you're interested in this at all, we had a really insightful, wonderful couple of hours with Roman Sharameta a couple of weeks ago. That's in our Spotify archive. And also, by the way, a lot of more and more of our stuff is going up onto YouTube also. So that's another option to listen to. But as I said, that was really, it's worth listening to if you're interested in this at all with the program with Roman Sharameta. Back to you, Alan.
Thanks, Robin. This is one of those extraordinary Volya conversations that Robin organizes, actually. Robin has brought so many key guests here to Volya, Roman being one. Andrew, in his latest article, is up in the nest. I'm going to rely on you, Robin, to pronounce his last name for me. He's a historian, a columnist for the Kyiv Independent and also for the New York Post, uh, and always well worth reading. Hopefully, he'll be back with Robin and me sometime during the daytime. Sometime it seems to me, rather than in the evening
Yeah, well,
here.
because he's in the Netherlands, and our evening in the U.S. is the middle of the night for him. So yeah.
So all that is coming up. Some of it is being planned, but all you Volio listeners, I know you have reminders in your calendars for Booms and Woe, Mocker's extraordinary program. If you don't wake up to Booms and Woe, uh, you might as well, I don't know, not wake up. But because it's just, but listen to Mockers in the morning. It's the morning for me. Here we are in the middle of the week. I think Decoding Trolls is coming up with James later this week as well, Robin.
Yep, that's tomorrow.
Yeah, after
Yep.
us on.
People think I don't look at the calendar.
People know you don't look at the calendar. Excuse me,
True.
Alan. But the calendar, which Alan doesn't look at, which he seems to remember anyway, we have Mockers and Firefella are going to be on in a few hours. That's 2 a.m. My time. So let's see. That's 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 4 hours from now, followed by Will and Joanna. So that's a great, I mean, there's a great 4 hours you get to get a lot out of. At 11, let's see, that let's say 10:30 Eastern time, 10:30 a.m. James and Wendy are on with Decoding Trolls for Decoding Distant Folklore. Also very interesting and very really delves into the disinformation issue that we're seeing is so important in all of this. That's it for tomorrow. And then and also, as Alan was saying, you catch all this stuff on Spotify and more on YouTube if you miss it when we're broadcasting. I must say this is one of my frustrations. When I was in Ukraine, I could catch Mockers every morning and before breakfast, and now it's in the middle of my night again. So it's very distressing to me.
It is distressing. I know Prince has come up to tell me about some appointment I have uh, in my calendar. Oh, thank God she had to drop down.
Alan. Yes, well, fortunately, you have people who keep an eye on the calendar to make sure you know what's going on. Alan is absolutely recalcitrant about getting onto the Volley Radio calendar, but we love him, so we put up with him.
Well, I just don't
as
know. I
as
don't know
as
how. The landline
as
won't load it.
as somebody who knows this, Alan doesn't even have access to the calendar because he never uses it.
And I mean, it's really tough to get onto the calendar too, right? You get a link and you click on it. It's but like I said, Alan is Alan, so that's fine. But it's fun to razz you anyway.
Well, I used the calendar just the other day by asking Prince, "What's on the calendar?"
And you never figured out the 6-7 reference. That's a young hip thing, so I guess that makes sense.
I,
And
I,
by the way,
I
my
didn't.
bird is in the other room yelling, "That's right."
I didn't even know it was 6-7.
I have no idea what these guys are talking about, but I have the feeling I don't want to. So
Those memes I posted the other day with the guys like putting their hands up and down. It's 6-7.
all right, I'm clueless. What can I say?
Well, Robin, I'm clueless too. I, okay, so it's 6-7. Uh,
Okay, well, I think we've degenerated at the point, Alan, where we can consider shutting down sometime soon.
Degenerate.
this really is when you want host connection problems to be true.
Well, we do have host connection problems, but it's what does my son say? Uh, Something about about there's a connection issue between brain and keyboard or something like that. So I'm having host connection issues myself, but we can't solve it by starting an extra session of the space.
Well, it is time to thank you, Robin, as always, for a great Volya radio conversation, and to thank all of our speakers, Will and James, Lexicon and Prince, uh, Just American, and others who joined us, Anka, and all of our listeners here on Volya Radio. And it is time for Robin and me to say Slava Ukraini.
Heroyam slava, slava nazi.
Smert Voraham.
Thank you, everyone. Do peremocha, as Will would say, and skoro pobачимось.
Побачимось.
Optimus.
Thank you for joining us on the radio. We look forward to seeing you again. Your audience. Your audience.